What's up, everybody, and welcome back to the channel. Today I'm going to be discussing my thoughts and opinions on the FNAF movie that just came out. I'm joined by a special guest. You know him, you love him, random person.
Hey, what's going on?
So basically, we just watched the FNAF movie, and we're going to go through this entire thing, break it down, give our thoughts and opinions on each thing, the differences, the similarities between the game and the movie. And this video will contain massive spoilers, so watch at your own risk. The movie is out now, so you can go see it. But yeah, let's get straight into it with our first thing we want to go into.
Yeah, so first of all, I think we should talk about some of the general expectations we had prior to viewing, because this movie has been in development and it's been rumored to have been coming out for years at this point, so I think everyone had a set of expectations coming into
it. Yeah, for sure. I mean, it's been out for like only a little bit, and it's already like people already love it so much. I mean, like this was rumored around 8 years ago is whenever it was like mostly starting to develop, when all this like clout came around, and you know, there's a lot of expectations that were definitely there for what this movie was going to be like. And honestly, my expectations were kind of blown out of proportion, but in a good way, I'd like to say.
Yeah, I think personally, I was just hoping for specific scenes and certain aspects of the plot to be elaborated on, which I feel this movie excelled on. For one, we got the FNAF 1 location in great detail. We had the FNAF 1 animatronics, of course. It's hard to forget about that. And we even had some more obscure animatronics like Golden Freddy that had extended screen time and were directly shown.
Yeah, that's a good point. That's a good thing to bring up. You know, like this movie, I had the expectations that this movie was going to be more pop jump scary and just more kind of just the game feel, like we're just in Five Nights at Freddy's, and it didn't really do that, which I kind of liked. It completely did something different than what I was expecting, and you know, it wasn't a bad thing that it didn't meet my expectations, but you know, I would have liked to see what it would have been like if it was that way, but you know, that's just how it was, you know.
Well, I think we should go ahead and overview the general plot. We don't know how many of you have seen the movie at this point or not, but since this is a spoiler video, we need to go ahead and lay out the plot for those of you who may not have seen it. So again, continue at your own risk. Spoilers are ahead.
Yeah. So the plot is we follow our main protagonist, Mike Schmidt. They never say his last name, but that is the person who is the main character. He's basically a guy who's pretty washed up. He lives with his sister. Everyone thought it was his daughter in the trailers, but that was not the case. He works at the security guard in a mall, which is, you know, a neat little add toward the whole security guard type thing. And I also like the little touch with the Chica's Magic Rainbow in the yogurt shop. I think that was really funny. Like, but that's the beginning, and it just kind of goes from there. He gets an offer from a guy that goes by the name of, well, it's William Afton, but he goes by a different name. I can't remember it, so it'll be on screen.
Yeah, it was a false alias.
Yeah, and then from here, he gets offered the job at Freddy Fazbear's Pizza. Now, it doesn't go straight into the plot, though. From here, it just kind of basically does some ground building about like what basically Mike's life is at the moment, which is nice that it's not throwing us straight into the scares and stuff, which is definitely appreciated.
Yeah, and then it focuses on his little brother. So by this point, I didn't realize it was Mike Schmidt. I thought we were talking about Michael Afton. So I was confused initially because it focuses on his younger brother, and he has a Nebraska thing above his bed, and he'll listen to bird sounds because he's attempting to relive the memory of when his younger brother was kidnapped by an unknown criminal, and he is trying to remember who it is in order to find them, and the movie focuses heavily on him trying to remember it by entering through the dream state, and it's a recurring theme, which we'll elaborate further on down the line.
Yeah, for sure. And to start off with that, he, in the mall, already sees a kid that he think is getting kidnapped, but he's not, and he basically beats the crap out of a guy in a fountain. I mean, it's a pretty funny thing to see, but basically that's from that whole, you know, torment almost. And then from here, the movie kind of just unfolds. He gets the offer from William Afton, And then from there, he basically doesn't know if he wants to take the job or not, but he more just has to ponder that. And then he does eventually take the job once he realizes that Abby will be okay.
Yeah, he needs to make himself look better as well, because by this point he's got a note of delinquency on his door, and he's worried that he'll lose custody of his kid, so he needs to step up, get a job, become more stable in order to keep custody of Abby.
Yeah, for sure, because her aunt is actually trying to take custody away from Mike, so he obviously wants a better resume. And prior to this job, he's been fired from multiple ones from different reasons as to why. But, maybe it's the big break he's been looking for, After this, he eventually goes to Freddy Fazbear's Pizza. And what I like that this is something that is kind of like, most people wouldn't catch this, but if you're more someone who's played the games and knows the lore, the first time he's there, there's not really much that goes around. There's basically the animatronics are there, and not too much happens. I mean, he goes back into his dream world, and he sees all the kids, right?
Yeah, he sees all the kids again, and I believe the first time he confronts them, he goes to talk to them, and they all just run away.
Yeah, and the kids we're referring to are the crying children, or the souls that possess the animatronics that were murdered from the games. And then basically, you may think, oh, why did all these kids just come here? Well, obviously, since their souls haunt the pizzeria pretty much, it's going to kind of affect his dream in a sense. So they just kind of appear out of nowhere. I like how it's in his dream, though, and not just like around him in the pizzeria. But from this point, basically, that's all that really happens in the first night, so to speak. It doesn't really go by the night system. That's just basically the first shift that happens, and then he wakes up. So
yeah, and then afterwards it cuts to a diner called Sparky's Diner, and a quick cameo by Matt Pat. We'll refer to this later, but you see the person that Mike is having to worry about taking custody away from them, and you see her lawyer, and you see two other people that will again be important later on, and they're figuring out the best way to win the case and take custody of Abby away from Mike. And they talk about digging up criminal activity on him, and the aunt has hired those people to do it, but they turned up nothing about it.
Yeah.
And one of them is the person who's living with Mike.
Yeah. So Max, she is the babysitter, basically. And she was babysitting for Mike, but not only that, her aunt, the person trying to win custody, is trying to make her be like, go digging around in his house to see what he's doing. And to her knowledge, he's not a bad guy. It's just he has some problems, and I guess the aunt is just a complete like pain in the butt, because she's just trying to take his sister, basically. And then the other guy, I believe, was just some accomplice, I believe. But they're basically, from there, they go to the place. Is that what happens?
Yeah, so they come up with the genius way of making Mike lose custody, and their grand plan is to break into Freddy Fazbear's during daytime and to absolutely trash the place to make it look like Mike didn't lock up correctly, and to make him get fired. That way he looks less appealing to a judge to hold custody over Abby.
Yeah. From that point, though, they do eventually come to the place, but before that, there's another night that takes place at the pizzeria. From this point, he meets Vanessa, I don't even know, just a police officer. And this is where a big lore spike comes that me and a random person here kind of got really confused about, because if you know, Vanessa is obviously a security guard in, Security Breach. So this already may throw like a curveball at you, but just so you know, just so before we go to more into the lore, this movie is not directly linked to the games, so don't let that freak you out, which I think is a correct reason they should have done that. I'll go more into that later, and we'll explain more about that in a second. But that's basically, he meets this girl named Vanessa, and
yeah, and it seems like when he meets Vanessa that she knows more than she's letting on, which we'll come to find out later down the road. But going back on track to the people who break in. You see them break into it, and they have crowbars and whatnot, and you see them break the arcade machines and just absolutely trash the place.
Yeah.
But it cuts to the stage, and you see that Bonnie is missing, and you realize that the people are broken into the restaurant. You realize that the animatronics have started to go after them, and the first casualty happens when one of them enters the kitchen. And usually in FNAF 1, you can't see the cams.
So yeah, I think that was I like that ad a lot, that they kind of like took the aspect of that and just kind of got rid of it, which was a nice ad and a little nod. But basically he's trashing the kitchen, and then Chica, like in this scene, it basically does some really good like suspense where you think that the animatronic's gonna appear, and then at one point you can see Chica actually passes by like a fan that's spinning. It's very subtle, and you may not catch it if you're not paying attention. But then after this, he like a I think it's a cellar or something starts like rattling or something.
Yeah, it's this fridge, and it distracts him, and he turns around and lets his guard down. And when he opens it, he sees Carl the Cupcake, and then he turns around, and when he looks back, Carl is gone. And then he turns around again, and Chica is there this time. And then Carl like hops on his face and starts eating him.
Yeah. This is probably this is one of the big gore parts. Is basically the animatronics. I feel like whenever they break in, kind of realize that they're trashing the place, so they kind of already go into attack mode, and you can tell. You'd have to watch the movie to get more of the feel for this, but basically, Carl just starts violently like chomping on. Well, I don't know what the dude's name is, but the guy in the kitchen starts chomping on his face, and then the uncle, I believe, sees this happening, and like Chica eerily like kind of turns and looks at him, which like completely freaks him out, which is just, I think, was really well done. We'll go more on the gore too. But this is a really good part. I think it was executed quite well.
Yeah. And then you see him, in response, start to run away. And instead of going to the exit, which probably would have been the smarter move considering they had just broken into it, he darts into the nearest closed area, which is the supply closet.
Yeah.
And a great nod to the first game, when he shuts it in, Bonnie is in there, which in FNAF 1, Bonnie is the only one that even goes into the supply closet. And it doesn't show what happens, but you see him trying to escape the closet, and you see him just getting pummeled and blood getting all over the window.
Yeah. He basically wipes his bloody hand on the window, and you notice that the guy who basically caused the entire like break-in, he sees this from the cam, sees them screaming and stuff, and goes to check it out. Well, once Bonnie comes out, he completely tries to get out of there, like sprints away and runs away from that area. He goes somewhere. Doesn't he go to the hallway?
Yeah, he tries to go to the exit door and get out, similarly to the night guard in the intro. But you hear Foxy in the hallways, and then you see him towards the end of it, and then you see him close distance, and you hear him attack the guard.
Yeah.
That's all that happens.
Yeah, basically. And then from this point, you would think that the break-in's over. Well, then you realize that Max, the babysitter, is another character that's actually going to come into here. So basically, she was just wandering in the kitchen, I think, and then basically the ghost child of Freddy starts luring her into the safe room, or the animatronic parts and service.
Yes.
And I always like little nods, like ghostly, ghouly effects like this. And once she gets into there's a Freddy animatronic. I don't know if it's the Freddy in the movie or just like another suit, but basically the ghost child disappears, and it seems that he went inside the animatronic. And she goes up to check, and then from there, like, his hand appears as a little scare, but you would think that that's the end of that little thing, right?
Yeah, and then out of nowhere, you end up, it doesn't show it directly, but you can see the shadow that Freddy just bites her completely in half, which has pretty big implications for the lore it tends of bite strength and the bite of 83, but it is also a good example of cinematography done right, considering this is a PG-13 movie. It's probably one of the goriest scenes, but it is all implied. It's not directly shown.
Yeah. You see it snap and stuff, and it's on screen for a little bit. It's very cool to see. I think that was really cool, and I didn't expect it at all. I didn't know that was going to happen. And then it immediately cuts to, I believe, a TV screen that Abby was watching, I believe, if I'm right, to kind of like wrap up that whole part.
So basically, long story short, they all end up getting killed because they're going in there maliciously, so the animatronics make them pay the price for it. So then at this time, it starts following Mike Schmidt again, and Abby asks to go to work with him at this point. So reluctantly, he agrees, and he takes her. He makes like this little tent for her to be in.
Yeah, because the babysitter, Max, is dead, so he has to bring her with him.
Yeah, and then by this point, he had already had another dream, and what you realize is these dreams aren't just his imagination, because in one of them, he follows Fritz, who is the child who possesses Foxy. Once he starts running away, and he grabs onto him, and you see his eyes like turn black, and it looks like blood's coming out of them.
And then he slashes him on the arm.
Yeah, and then when he wakes up, he still has that injury. That's actually the night that he met Vanessa, the police officer. So
bandages him.
Yeah. So by this point now,
he has another dream.
Yeah, he's sleeping again, and yeah, that part's important. But the mainly important part about him dreaming is he cannot watch Abby, and she hears a voice calling her name. So she leaves while he's sleeping and goes over to where the animatronics are.
Yeah. So basically, from this point, he's confronting one of the children. Now, you may think that this is the Freddy, but this is rumored to be the Cassidy. Now, Cassidy in the games is not a boy. It's a girl, I'm pretty sure. I mean, Cassidy is a pretty female name. But basically, he's asking this boy if he knows who took his brother away. And he's basically saying, well, will you give us what we want? And he's like, yeah, if you tell me who it is. And then you see a drawing in the dirt of what the boy was drawing, which is, the bunny suit. And to all of you know, that's Michael or William Afton, Springtrap. And then it goes, pretty sure, it cuts to him waking up.
Yeah, and then he notices Abby is gone, so he walks over to the main stage, and he hears Abby screaming, so obviously he is terrified, so he runs over to the main stage to see what's going on, and it turns out they were just tickling her, apparently, so she was actually not in harm's way. By this point, Mike notices something is up. He initially suspects that someone is controlling the animatronics, but he starts to realize they seem a bit too animated for someone to be controlling them, and there's no one there to even do it. So he starts to realize that there's something more to these animatronics than he initially suspected.
For sure. At this point, we realize that the animatronics like Abby, so once Abby initially vouches for Mike that he's good too, they basically don't go hostile toward him anymore. And then basically from this point, Mike is a bit wheezy on what just happened, and then they go home pretty much.
Yeah, so by this point, the movie kind of takes a refrain away from the action, and it's kind of a more calmer section of the movie. So it all culminates when he ends up going back for another night with Abby and Vanessa, and they end up building a fort out of chairs and whatnot with the animatronics and just having a bunch of fun. But at the same time, Vanessa and Mike go to the safe room, and you see an animatronic that hasn't been in any of the games that looks pretty similar to one of the book animatronics, and it's this clown-looking doll. And then you see Vanessa put a broom against it, and the spring lock snaps shut.
This whole kind of building chairs thing may confuse you, but this is what happens in the movie. Now, you may think that this takes away from the old Five Nights at Freddy's aspect, but it kind of almost gives it a sense of it's not trying to take itself too seriously, but adding a bit of stuff that can work for building. Obviously, she trusts the animatronics, and this will later come to bite her in the back whenever she realizes that later in the movie that they're not as friendly as they once were. again, this is it's kind of like a Camp Rock type deal, little like montage in this clip, but it's still fun to see the whole like friendly animatronic type deal. Definitely something I was not expecting here. And then yes, he goes to see that, well, like Springlocks baby looking thing with Vanessa, and then again we see that Vanessa is Michael Afton's or William Afton's daughter.
And by this point, Mike has sort of pieced together what has gone on with the missing children. He doesn't know the full details, like the fact that William Afton murdered them and that they were murdered in the safe room, or what exactly unfolded in that situation, but he does know they went missing in this exact establishment, and he notices that Vanessa's demeanor changes after the spring lock, and once they exit, she tells him never to bring Abby again, otherwise he'll shoot her.
Yeah, or she'll shoot him. Yeah, because before this, Abby like touches Bonnie's guitar, which kind of shocks her, and then she wakes up, and then after they're all good and said, basically what happens where she's like, yeah, don't bring her back. From this point, Abby would be confused by this, but he doesn't tell her that directly. He basically wants to, but doesn't want to hurt her feelings, so he gets her aunt to watch her for her night, right?
Yeah. So then he goes back once again. So by this point, he doesn't want to bring Abby anymore. And he's starting to press her a little bit more because she started having dreams as well of the missing kids. And she has had a dream about his little brother going missing, so he presses her on it.
Yeah, because doesn't she make a drawing about it?
Yeah, he sees a drawing about it, so he questions her about it. And she said that the missing kids didn't tell her anything about the person driving the car.
Yeah, so basically, Abby, even before she gets the animatronics and realizes that the ghosts are in the animatronics, before the whole movie starts, Abby refers to her friends. And we don't know what this means at the beginning, but she's referring to the ghost. So apparently, either she knew these ghosts before she went to Freddy Fazbear's Pizza, or the ghost knew her. But this is originally who she's referring to whenever she says, my friends or something, because, well, they obviously are friends some way. But yeah, she basically has a drawing of the flashbacks that Mike is having where Gabriel, his brother, is being taken away in a car. And then again, Mike confronts her about it and says, do you know anything? And no one knows who exactly, except they say that it's just a man in a bunny suit, which is definitely something that's not directly telling you it's William Afton, because all the kids know is that it was some bunny suit dude, so that's all they can tell, because they actually don't know who it is.
Yeah, it's also worth noting that at this point, Vanessa has warned Mike with a bit of a vague, almost threatening statement. She said that she tried to warn him and that he knows now, and the he is never referred to. We as the audience can conclude likely that it is William Afton she is referring to. As we know, she is his child, and this will come into play later in the movie. But by this point, things start to take a bit of a darker turn because Mike doesn't want to bring Abby anymore since she already got injured going last time from the explosion, and it's just not safe for her, especially with those kids that went missing only 13 years prior to him taking this job position.
Yeah. And then he has another dream. Well, he basically, at this point, whenever they were bringing Abby, he wasn't going to sleep. Because in a certain scene, basically, Vanessa tells him to stop, like, taking a drug to help him sleep and, sleeping on the job. And then basically, he has another flashback with, I'm going to refer to him as Cassidy, but the Golden Freddy, or Cassidy, basically shows him what the dream he wants is, and basically tells Mike that he wants to have his family. He doesn't want to find out who his brother's kidnapper is. Then he gets an offer from Cassidy, and Cassidy tells him that they can give him this dream every night if they let them have Abby. We don't really know what that means, but Mike allegedly agrees, and then immediately regrets it. From here, all the children in the memory or the dream completely fade away. Completely.
Yeah, and then by this point, Mike refusing basically annoys the children and they start coming after him. So he starts trying to go against what they were saying, and you see him start to get basically mangled up by the kids while he's in the dream. You see the kids going past him and scratching him. So we can conclude, based on how his interactions with Foxy scratching him in the dream world were, we can conclude that they're all around him in real time while he's sleeping, and they're just beating the ever-living crap out of him. And he wakes up, and it's the torture Freddy mechanism we see in the intro that security guard dies from, where it's like the empty head and torso with buzzsaws in it, essentially. And he ends up escaping it in Saw style. And then he ends up trying to escape, where Foxy confronts him, and somehow by a stroke of luck he ends up escaping.
Yeah, because I think Vanessa opened the door or something, either that or he just opened it miraculously. And then basically I think from here he does Vanessa like talk to him again, or
So by this point, as we've already established, Golden Freddy goes back to get Abby, and then they get into a taxi where there's a funny cameo by Corey Kinsham, and then they end up driving to the establishment while this is happening to Mike, and the animatronics take Abby to the front stage where they perform from her, and based on the vague deal Cassidy made with Mike, we can assume that they're going to try to spring lock her and turn her into one of them.
Yeah. That's so basically what happened too is Cassidy is basically saying that, or trying to lure Abby to the place. Now he does, of course, but she wouldn't know anything's up because, well, again, prior to this, the animatronics made Abby trust them. Whenever she arrives, they try to spring lock her, but something noted by Vanessa is that the animatronics don't know that they're hurting her. They don't want to, but again, she says that William Afton somehow has manipulated the animatronics into doing bad things, Yeah.
And by this point, it's also established what the eye color of the animatronics means, because we see the animatronics' eyes turn red, which we later come to find out means they're under the control of William Afton, and he is manipulating not only their knowledge, but also just their behavior, which will play a crucial role in the finale and climax of the movie.
Mm-hmm. For sure. From here, in the scene, Vanessa is talking to Mike about how to stop the animatronics, and that electricity is the only way to stun them. So he breaks into the pizzeria via a different way, gets in, and then he shocks the animatronics that are on the stage to get to the back room where Chica is taking Abby to be spring locked. Well, he reluctantly saves Abby, and then he needs to escape. Well, then from this point, Carl the Cupcake attacks his leg, and he's trying to fight off Carl and tells Abby to run. Well, Abby runs, but before this, Mike never dealt with Foxy. Foxy was still active the entire time. And you get to see a little clip of the child being the one watching Abby as she's trying to go hide before going into the animatronic.
Yeah, so that's Cassidy, and he in this movie is the last one. So for Foxy, by this point, they had already had to tase Chica because she was the one trying to put Abby in the spring lock. So after that, again, Mike runs away, Carl attacks him, Abby runs, and Foxy is still there, so she hides in the ball pit. And right before he ends up finding her, Vanessa shocks him, and you see Golden Freddy sort of in the background in child form stalking them. And then Mike runs to the entrance with them, and this is where possibly the greatest scene of the entire movie happens, where you see William Afton dressed in the old Spring Bonnie suit walk out in epic fashion in front of Mike.
Yeah. He has the classic glowing white eyes, and basically, no one knows that the guy who gave him the job at Freddy's is the same dude, unless you saw the trailers or exactly. But from here, he's just basically he's trying to escape, but Michael Afton, or I keep saying Michael Afton, William Afton doesn't exactly want that, so he's trying to stick the animatronics on him. Well, then Vanessa starts trying to fight back her father reluctantly. Then he eventually kills her, and then they realize or Mike realizes that the only way to stop them is to mess with the drawings almost.
Yeah. So on the drawing, it's shown multiple times. So the first time it shows it, it's a children's drawing that shows Spring Bonnie holding the hands of the 5 children that went missing. And the first time it shows it, you hear laughter and then screaming. So you know those are the murdered children. And then it later cuts to that exact same image, and we realize that William Afton is actually manipulating the memories and thoughts of the children in order to make them do his bidding, which is further demonstrated in games such as FNAF 3. But they figure out the way to counter that is to make a different drawing that makes the children remember what actually happened.
Yeah. From here, basically, all the lights go off. The Vanessa, Mike, and Abby all escape. Vanessa is being carried out because she's just been stabbed by her father. And then from here, we get the scene that everyone has been waiting for, the notorious Springlock scene, which is really good. I like the way it is. It's not as gory as I thought it was going to be, but I still think it is well executed, too. We just see them eventually dragging William Afton to some room, I think. I don't know which one it is, but basically this is how the final climax kind of ends.
Yeah, so this was a remarkable scene. I think just the whole finale with Spring Bonnie was possibly it's as much as I could have hoped for from the movie. So it shows in pretty close detail how the spring locks work. Obviously, since it's PG-13, there's not as much gore as you would imagine there would be. The main difference from how I imagined the spring locks would be is he actually didn't have the mask on, so there wasn't an endoskeleton head in there, we can assume. And then he says, it's classic line, you all know, I will always come back. And then he puts his mask on, and you see the spring locks sort of enter into him. And we don't know fully how this exact suit works, because you only really see it going into his chest, so we don't know if it's in his legs and arms too. But we do know that he is clearly going to die and become Springtrap, which we see in FNAF 3 later on. And from there you see them escape, and then you see Springtrap with William Afton still in it, and they're dragging him into the safe room, and you can see him sort of convulsing and reaching out to Cassidy, and she closes the door on him.
Yeah, for sure. And then we get a cut to basically Abby doing a lot better in school now, that kind of thing. Mike is doing a lot better as well. They visit Vanessa to make sure she's fine and that sort of thing. And yeah, that happened before William reached out to Cassidy and shut the door. That's kind of the final. That's it, the end. And then that's basically the movie. That's the plot, the entire thing. And then there's a after credit scene of the little balloon boy figure that's been like scaring Mike, that scares Corey Kenshin in his car, which is pretty funny, a nice little ad. And from this ending, we can tell that there's not going to be a sequel or any sort of thing after this. Not to my knowledge, at least. I don't think so. I don't think there needs to be one. But yeah, I definitely think that it's a whole interesting movie by the way it's displayed.
Well, yeah, so that was quite a lot to unfold. Major lore impacts from this movie, and it was really just like watching one of the games on the screen. So now, let's start shifting towards the lore direction. So how do we think the lore in this movie competes with the lore in the game? Do we think they coincide? Is there conflicts? How should we go about unpacking this?
Yeah. I think that the lore is definitely present, but there's a lot of stuff that is not the same. You can obviously tell that, well, Vanessa is not William's daughter, of course, it's Elizabeth. That's obviously a flaw. I don't know if this is Scott's initial decision or whatever, but there's a lot of differences, I think, that are added to make the movie being able to be, like, good. For example, we know that, like, we get to see the 5 kids, which is obviously from the original games. We get to see how Mike is the main character, of course, like he is in the games. We didn't know that he had a sister. We knew Michael Afton has a brother and a sister, but not Mike Schmidt. And apparently Mike Schmidt in this movie is his own person, completely different from Michael Afton. This movie's lore is shifted more toward just kind of FNAF 1 and basically what happened with the missing kids incidents explained in a different way, I would say.
Yeah. So by this point, too, on the security cam footage, this is the only time the date is verbatim stated. We figure out that it's 2000. So by this point, the Bite of 83 had taken place 17 years ago, and the actual missing children's incident had happened over 13 years ago. So we can conclude this is towards the end of the rope for the FNAF 1 location.
Mm-hmm.
And it's almost in shambles at this point. So it fits in with the first game. Initially, when we viewed this, we initially thought Michael Afton was the main protagonist of this story, but we later figured out it was Mike Schmidt, which makes it fit in a lot more cohesively with the general gameplay.
Yeah.
That aside, there are so many differences in terms of the Afton family between this movie and the games. Like, for instance, probably the most noteworthy thing is Vanessa being William Afton's daughter. So we already knew, we had a general guide of how the Afton family was formatted. We know William had a wife. There's some rumors that she possessed Ballora, but we don't know yet. We know that he had Elizabeth, who, as you know, inhabited Circus Baby because Circus Baby trapped her in her chest cavity and then she died once Baby got sent to the scooper. Then there was Chris Afton, who was the victim of the Bite of 83, who got put in those night terrors in FNAF 4 as a result. And then there's, of course, Michael Afton, who, as of this movie coming out, we now know was the protagonist in FNAF 3, then Sister Location, and then FNAF 6. Whereas initially we suspected it was FNAF 1, but now we know that Mike Schmidt is his own identity and not a false alias.
Yeah, for sure. Now, Michael Afton could be going under the name Mike Schmidt, but we don't know that. That's just what we are kind of building upon from this. It's kind of putting bits and pieces into the lore we all know, but the lore here being changed doesn't really change the movie or make it bad. I just think it makes it to where it's watchable and not gonna like make your brain like explode, so to speak.
Then there's of course minute differences. One of the ones I noticed was mainly the spring locks themselves. So the way the spring locks functioned, we aren't really explicitly shown in the game, but based on the reaction of William and the pixel bit information, we can conclude it was a lot faster and more brutal than what was in the movie. In the movie, it was quite slow, and it looks like it would have taken him a long time to die, and he probably would have died from blood loss, and not just blunt trauma, as it would appear he did in the FNAF 3 ending. And then he ends up getting spring locked in the center stage with animatronics around him, but those of you who have played FNAF 3 know that the animatronics had been disassembled by this point, and the spirits were the ones that coerced him to go into the spring lock suit, particularly the spirit of Cassidy. And he got spring locked in the safe room, and he went into the suit to begin with because he thought he would be safe in it. And there's water that dropped from the ceiling and set the spring locks off.
Yeah. And this kind of plays into him putting the mask back on in the middle of it, just to be like, oh, I'm still here, whatever, that kind of thing. That's the biggest difference, I would say, that like in that whole thing. Again, it kind of coheres with the lore a little bit, almost telling it in its own way, so to speak, but it's still paying tribute to like how Cassidy has the final like, we're done with you, go away type deal. So it is playing off the lore and that whole thing, because in this movie they had to explain how the kids died almost without showing like that happen, but at the same time they had to explain, Mike and going to the pizzeria.
Yeah, so of course there's going to be a lot to unpack with this movie. Expect a Matt Pat upload soon, but for now there's just a few brief details we noticed in our first viewing, but of course more will be revealed in time. For now though, let's turn our attention towards some Easter eggs that we noticed throughout the movie, and trust me, there was quite a few of them.
Yeah. Well, for starters, there's obviously Balloon Boy that appears in the locker. That's obviously a tribute to FNAF 2. And then I like the biggest Easter eggs I like is basically the scenes from the games. Like, I love the Bonnie in the closet. I think that's cool. The Chica in the kitchen. And then we get to see that most of the people that are who died by Foxy are in the hallway outside the office door, which he runs from in the game, which I just think definitely is a big tribute. And then
one of the nights that Mike is there, you can see it's me written on one of the mirrors, which it pans to several times, so I'm sure most of you noticed that. And then they have some other details as well. For those of you who have been following FNAF for a while, most of you probably know about the false rumor of Sparky the dog, which was a poorly cropped image that talked about a fictitious animatronic that would appear in the game. And Sparky is referenced several times. I'm not sure what Scott's exact intent was with it, but we have Sparky's Diner, I'm pretty sure it was called, and then we're shown an actual live animatronic of Sparky that's in one of the rooms.
Yeah.
And it looks like a wearable suit, sort of similar to Spring Bonnet.
Yeah, I think that's a big bone thrown to the creator or whoever basically made that hoax. I think that was something directly put in with Scott, just like the other things I talked about. Those are the biggest Easter eggs, I would say, but there's also just tiny tributes to other stuff as well. Like, one of the biggest things I would say is probably in how in the movie during the yogurt shop, how the Chica's Magic Rainbow is there, of course, just small little things like that. That's one of the biggest first Easter eggs you see is that Chica's Magic Rainbow.
Yeah, and then one of the most memorable scenes as well is when you actually get to see Golden Freddy. And in none of the games have we seen Golden Freddy actually standing up and functioning as a real animatronic. So this sort of recontextualizes how we can perceive Golden Freddy, because we know Golden Freddy, I believe he is a corporeal animatronic, but at the same time he seems to be more spirit-based than the other animatronics, which is confirmed by this. But many of us initially suspected that Golden Freddy lacked an exoskeleton, which this movie challenges because we actually see him walking as if he had a functioning exoskeleton. And we can see that he has blue eyes, which isn't apparent in any of the games, because usually he has the black possessed eyes. And we see him walking as he's leading Abby to the diner. And we think he's a functioning animatronic like the other ones, but then we see him disappear once Abby enters, and we see him in the spirit form more often than as an actual animatronic. So we can conclude that Golden Freddy can just take whatever form they want to take for whatever reason. Most likely because Cassidy is much angrier than the other spirits are, and we can conclude that since in the Give Life minigame, it doesn't show Cassidy until the very last frame, and there wasn't enough animatronics to stuff Cassidy.
Yeah.
So that could possibly have something to do with it.
Oh yeah, for sure. I think that's definitely something too that is basically shown throughout the movie.
Yeah. And then as for other Easter eggs, I mean, there's a bunch of other minor ones in terms of book references as well. As aforementioned earlier, there's another animatronic that they try to springlock Addie in that looks quite similar to one of the other animatronics in the books. I mean, this movie in general just pays homage to a lot of culture that's in the FNAF franchise, and I just think it was pretty awesome of Scott to include all of that.
Yeah, for sure.
Next, I mean, obviously this has been a highly anticipated movie, but this also goes under the genre of horror. So what do we think the scariest scenes were? How do we think we could have made this scarier? And just in general, how scary do we think it was?
Well, yeah, I mean, this definitely set the bar high. With when my expectation played out, I expected a lot more gore, but for the gore that we got, this added a lot. I mean, if you've seen Penguin OZ's review, he mentions that the animatronic's the backbone in Five Nights at Freddy's is the jump scares, and we don't really see that much of that. We see 2, I believe, and basically that's not in the movie pretty much, and it just kind of takes a different take on it. Do I think it's bad? No, not exactly, but I feel like the jump scariness could have added a little more in the aspect, but the gore scenes that we got, I think were done very well.
Yeah, like in one of the scenes, I wasn't expecting this scene at all, but it does show the dead bodies of the people who break in from earlier, one of which is the person who's attacked by Carl, and you see that their entire face is missing, which I was not expecting considering it's a PG-13 FNAF movie. So I was actually quite impressed to see Blumhouse and Scott and the whole team go all out for that scene. costume.
Yeah. That looks really well. And then seeing Max stuffed into a suit, that, like her upper half, that was pretty cool. Outside of the scariness, I mean, the parts that were just in there, just the animatronics being hostile, that mainly, Springtrap, of course, I refer to him, but William Afton, that was like a good part of it that was more creepy, and then just the whole eerie essence of the ghost children.
Yeah, and I mean, in general, like, some people say the tension wasn't well done, or that there weren't enough jump scares in general. I really attribute part of the lack of horror, though, to just being the amount of comic relief that's present. Because a good horror movie with tension doesn't give comic relief. It builds suspense and makes you think you aren't safe. But something to keep in mind is these aren't just killing machines. These aren't assassin droids. They're inhabited by children, and I feel like this movie did a great job exploring that, because usually when they bring violence in the film, it's out of fear. And that's shown aptly by Foxy, for instance, who attacks him when he's grabbing him and he's scared. And I feel Scott really knocked it out of the park with showing the child nature of most of these.
Yeah, I did appreciate that as well. I thought it was handled better than if it was just more violent the entire time. Even if everybody wanted this movie to be rated R, I feel like if it was, it could have taken away a lot from what we got.
Yeah. Speaking of that, let's say in a fictitious world with an infinite budget, no rating needed, how much further do we think Scott could have taken this project with complete free reign?
Well, yeah, I feel like in this movie, I feel like a lot of Scott's creative juices were kind of restricted by Blumhouse because of the PG-13 rating, being that the lore is all screwed up. I feel like the lore could have been completely on par from what it is in the games and, delved into a little better. That's not to say I don't think that the lore we got was good. I do really like it, and I do like what they've done with it. But Scott is a very creative person who dives a lot into the horror of stuff, and I don't know, it just doesn't seem like all of what Scott was capable of was present in this movie.
Yeah, I definitely would be curious to see if from here Scott could gain more free reign. I don't know how the box office is going to be. I already know there's heated critic reviews about the movie, but something to keep in mind is that it is a video game movie adaptation, and they do not have a notoriously good history of becoming successes. But overall, I'm just interested to see what direction Scott has for the series.
For sure. I think this movie, when it's a video game adaptation, out of all the ones I've seen before, definitely gets a 10 out of 10 rating in its own thing. There's still flaws with it, like there are with a lot of movies, but I still think it is executed correctly and well. This is something that I feel like Scott could have done, but is just added a little more to the whole story with, like, Mike or William Afton. We don't get to see him for the entire movie, basically, until the beginning and the end. I mean, he could have had a bigger presence, but, the animatronics kind of shined in their own glory there.
Yeah. I mean, I'd say by this point we've covered most of the big areas and thought-provoking parts of the movie. But are there any particular scenes that struck a chord with you?
Yeah, for sure. One of my favorite scenes, I just like the whole night guard at the beginning, basically showing the hostile nature of the animatronics and basically what we're used to and how everything goes. I like that whole little intro scene explaining that, and then later we get to see that kind of same thing happen similarly. And basically, I mean, outside of that, I also really like just a lot of the just horror jumps of it, the gore parts, and just the revealance of William Afton in Spring Bonnie costume.
Yeah, I know personally, probably my favorite scene was obviously Spring Bonnie being on scene. He was just so imposing the first time you saw him. It was probably the greatest reveal that the movie could have had. I know personally some scenes I would have liked to see added to the movie would be if a fire occurred. It wouldn't be completely accurate to the lore, as you know, because Springtrap catches on fire after the events of FNAF 3, and you see him in the secret ending of Sister Location, where he's almost impossible to see. But another scene I would have liked to see as well is probably, I liked the take they had on the suits, particularly with the buzzsaw ones, but I would have liked to see just a classic FNAF 1 style spring lock as well in the storage room.
For sure. I agree with you on that one.
But overall, where do we think the series is going to go from here? Will there be a sequel to this movie?
I said before, I don't think so, because again, there's only two things they could do. They can either develop the lore they have by going either into a FNAF 2 or 3 movie, and FNAF 2, as you know, is a prequel because it came before FNAF 1. So they have to change the lore, be like Mike Schmidt didn't know about FNAF and he had a job before about it, and it'd all be kind of weird. Now either that, or maybe Scott does another movie where his creativeness is not restricted at all and can finally make something. But I don't think there's going to be another movie, but that's the only thing I could see going in any way.
Yeah. Logistically, the only possibility of there being a sequel is assuming that this movie does well and Scott has motivation to continue in this venue of the series. But all I know is that I would love to see some of the other games explored. Mm-hmm. I think the visual effects team did an outstanding job with the animatronics, and I know I'd love to see some of the Wizards given a shot as well.
Mm-hmm, for sure. I think that would be really cool to see on screen as well.
Yeah. So, overall, I think we've covered almost all of our points. Mm-hmm. You want to go ahead and conclude it and summarize our points?
This basically wraps up this analysis of the Five Nights at Freddy's movie. Definitely, if you haven't seen this movie, go watch it for yourself. It is very good. Bring a friend, bring some money for some food, because it's definitely worth the watch, even a couple times at that most. I definitely think that this movie is definitely for more of the FNAF fandom. Now, if you're looking for a horror movie, this one is a fun watch, but I feel like you're going to get more appeal if you've played the games before and understand it a little bit, because, it just hits that way.
Yeah.
For sure.
Yeah. But, yeah, be sure to watch it. And peace.